Okay, hello YouTube. Today I'm just going to be kind of reporting on some basic chess news. We have a FIDE Candidates winner for 2024. That's the Indian player, Gukesh. And he is the youngest player to ever win the candidates. So very, very impressive result for such a young player, only 17 years old. He's going to be the youngest player to compete for the World Championship title. In the history of the game, and of course, if he wins the World Championship title, he will be the youngest world champion in history. So, as an American, I just have to be completely honest. I am disappointed. The last time America had a world champion was back in 1972 when Fischer won the title. So it has been 52 years. Yes, 52 years, a half a century. I wasn't even alive the last time we had a world champion, and I'm not a young spring chicken or anything. So we had a shot. Nakamura and Karyana were both the highest rated players going into the tournament. They had the best odds of winning the tournament overall. Really, we had about a better than 50% chance of having an American win this event. We couldn't win it. We got really close, within a half a point of winning the tournament. Gukesh was not really a favorite going in. He did exactly what you're supposed to do when you're not a favorite going in. He got draws against the top players in the tournament. He did not beat a single one of the guys in the top three. So like another level of disappointment there. He got all draws against Nepomniachtchi, all draws against Nakamura, all draws against Karyana. He just did better against the bottom half of the tournament. He scored a point and a half out of two against both of his Indian compatriots, and he also managed to get two clean wins against Abasov, although I shouldn't say clean wins. He got two wins against Abasov. And he split against Feroja. One win, one loss, and of course the rest of his games, were draws. So he ended up with the best score. He ended up with 9 out of 14, and he's going to be the challenger. And just as difficult as a game of chess as chess is, and how difficult it is to be technically accurate at this high of a level, he just did an absolutely phenomenal job of getting the job done. He exemplifies what I like to call sort of the modern style of young chess players, which is a style that, I'll admit, as an older player, and a lot of it is just maybe, sour grapes. I'm not a huge fan of this new style that younger players have, but, at the same time, my generation had a different style than the previous generation, and the previous generation wasn't a big fan of our style of play, which, of course, both styles and the push for these styles is heavily, heavily influenced by computer chess, and it's heavily influenced by AI, and it's just heavily influenced by the fact that we're finding out as we learn more and more about the openings, we care less and less about the individual openings and more about just playing the positions as accurately as possible. So people are more willing to get equality with either color and really from any position, and the main focus is just on just playing as accurately as possible and just making as few errors as possible. And so that's kind of what you see in Gukesh's games. We can take a look at this game that he has against Nijat Abasov. He plays the opening somewhat aggressively, I guess you could say. It's a Petrov's. So Abasov already is just kind of playing for equality, so that's what we see in a lot of modern games, just everybody playing for equality, and everybody knowing the theory sort of really, really deeply. We have a Steinitz variation, which is sort of a somewhat aggressive way to play it, and he actually plays it in one of the more aggressive attempts. He plays this d captures e5, and then he brings his bishop back to e2. This is actually a somewhat reasonable attempt to get some sort of asymmetry. It just doesn't work out. He just ends up, after a few more moves, they end up in something that's just really total equality, just nothing to write home about for anybody. A bunch of exchanges get made, the middle just gets completely simplified. Everything, as you can see, it's just all zeros. The position's just completely dead. But again, these young guys, they don't really care about that. They don't care about the assessment. They almost don't even care what color they're playing. Like whether they're playing white or black, it doesn't really seem to matter. They're just trying to play accurate moves. They know that there's a lot of chess to be won and lost in just these minor inaccuracies in the middle game, and that's sort of their primary focus. So he's just trying to play as accurately as possible with all these moves, and eventually just waiting for black to make some sort of error that he can capitalize on. And eventually he gets his way. He has this knight takes f5, which is an error. It allows rook to e6, and here white is in the driver's seat. But this game still had a whole bunch of ups and downs. Like, if we continue going through this game kind of went in both directions. White did not absolutely capitalize on his winning advantage the most. He didn't play a move like G4, which you're not going to see from these young guys. Like when these young guys have solid positions, they like to play them solidly. They don't like to take chances, even if they're the computer best picks. They don't put themselves out there the way like Topalov or Kasparov or these guys used to. They're going to play it kind of with a safety pin. They're going to play stuff like C4 and just kind of keep things nice and tight, which is fine. I mean, he ended up winning this game. He played C4 and then he continued to try to press from here, and he's pressing in a completely safe way. There's not going to be anything horribly wrong with anything that's going on here. But he failed to find ways to make great progress after a few more moves. Like Rook A8, he should just be completely winning here. We have Rook F4, pawn to D3, and then we have Queen takes A4, Queen A2, and I mean, you can just see the assessment. White's assessment is sky high. He just should be absolutely winning. But he just starts playing a little inaccurately here. Just, every time the position calls for him to make some sort of aggressive move that's also potentially compromising to his position, he just doesn't take the chance. So he's just going to play this as safely as possible, never taking any chances. And because of that, his position just sort of slowly dwindles downhill. I mean, he very safely blockades this pawn with the knight, absolutely the safest way to go, but as you can see, it's giving up a little bit of the evaluation. And every time he keeps seeking safety, bringing his king back and out of the line of fire, he's giving up a large portion of his advantage. Here the game is almost equal again, and Debasov is getting back into it. But again, he doesn't care about that. He's just pressing, eventually taking that pawn, and then eventually, pressing some more. The position gets kind of wild. It gets unclear. He wins an exchange, he gives it back, it gets more unclear, and we reach a queen and pawn endgame that objectively is completely drawn. And it should just be a tie, but they just keep playing. Should be a tie, should be a tie, should be a tie, should be a tie. Very, very boring, should be a tie. A lot of checking, a lot of time pressure stuff. Really should still be a tie. So still should be a tie. Even after all these exchanges and then both the queens appear at this endgame, if you look it up in most endgame books, should still be a tie. But there is a time thing going on here. So he manages to swindle him in the time pressure. He gets his king on what we call a cross-checking square. He plays king f5, and then black makes the final mistake in time pressure. He plays queen f1, which is a huge blunder because it allows queen f4 with a classic kind of cross-check, queen to e5, and then the cross-check idea is when the king moves, you get this king in check. And then it's over because we have queen g5 followed by queen f5, trading off the queens, and that's it. And once the queens come off the board, white wins. So that was his win against Debasov, and this is the type of win that you're going to see Gukesh over and over again. He gets a fairly safe position where he's maybe just a little bit better, maybe pressing. He doesn't really take any chances at all. You're not going to see him move the pawns in front of his king. You're not going to see him doing anything crazy. And he's just going to take advantage of mistakes. And as a matter of fact, his last round game against Nakamura, very similar. It doesn't really matter sort of what color he has. Nakamura was the one that was being creative. He was playing for more. This A3 move isn't all that good. But then again, this C5 move is kind of weird. You play c5 in this position because all you want is equality. You play c5 because you don't care that you just lost a tempo. Like, normally people play c5 like, my generation, we're going to play c5 a move earlier. Because it makes more sense. Because if they take, you're going to take back with the bishop that hasn't moved yet. But this new generation, they don't really care about that. They don't care about trying to save this tempo. They don't care about the tempo struggle so much. They know that both positions are of close enough to the same evaluation that it doesn't really matter. So why not just get to the position? And that's just the way that this new generation plays chess. This is sort of the new style. So bishop e7 and then c5, because what difference does it make? The evaluation is similar. So it still should be close to equal. So what does it matter that I lost this tempo? I'm freeing myself up to castle, so my opening problems are solved. In fairness, it's not even a new style. Like Lasker used to do stuff like this all the time. So there were players in the past that also shared this opinion of losing tempo is okay as long as I solve my opening problems. So it's not a new concept, but it's certainly not the most exciting way to approach chess, and it's not the way that guys like Kasparov approached it, or Fischer, or Tal, or even a couple of modern players like Karyana and Nakamura who were in the tournament. This is not how they approached the opening either. So Nakamura was actually a little thrown off by this. He wasn't expecting c5, so we had A3 from Nakamura, which wasn't the greatest move. As you can see, the computer says it already equalizes. Nakamura should have just, and he'll admit to it, he should have just castled or played Queen E2. Or even there's a lot of situations where you can just castle and then you can play DC5 and take advantage of the fact that the bishop has to two-step and then exchange the queens. And these positions are supposed to be advantage white. Understandably, Nakamura was in a must-win situation. He didn't want the queens off the board. Gukesh knew that, and that's part of the reason Gukesh played C5 in the first place in this situation, is to say, hey, do you want to make me two-step my bishop? We'll exchange queens, and the position will be completely, it'll be hard to win. It'll be better for white, but it'll be hard to win. And I'm going to play more accurately than you because that's part of what we do in my generation, is we just play super accurate chess. That's what these 17-year-olds do. So they just did this, and they exchanged. They got into this B4. What a phenomenally accurate move. They're already in new territory, and B4 is like the top computer pick. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of like older generation players that would have found this move, and that's part of the reason that the younger generation, they play chess like this, is because they can play this super accurate chess. They can play these super sharp moves that are the best move, equalizing in positions that are difficult like this. So B4, very good move, knight E4, and then all these exchanges, bishop B7. Black's completely equalized at this point. It's difficult for white to get anything, but what white needs to do is white needs to find a way to push D5 at the right moment, and Nakamura just kind of failed to do it. Knight D2 wasn't terrible, not as terrible as the assessment makes it look. And then after, say, knight c3, bishop c3, and then knight d7, really what Nakamura needs to do is he needs to find a way to play d5. So you can see, like, the computer's tech pick is rook ab1, bishop c6, d5. This would have given him some play, like rook ab1 and then bishop c6 and then push d5, because if you're going to give up this pawn on d4, you want to give it up in a way that isolates the pawn on d5 and opens up both your bishops towards the king. Opens up this dark squared bishop and opens up this light squared bishop. So that's kind of the ideal way to dump the d pawn and then try to get play. Nakamura opted for basically the same idea. He wanted to dump the d pawn, but he ended up leaving this pawn on the e6 square, which, again, I mean, just isn't ideal, and it just gives Gukesh a very easy way to continue to play the position. I mean, it's like, you're not getting anything here with white. I mean, it's just black's position is just too solid. But, Nakamura had the two bishops, and he was hoping he could play for a win because he has these two bishops that are going to be slicing and dicing, but let's get real. There's nothing here, and it becomes very clear after just two more moves. Like rook d1, and then queen b7, bishop b4, and now you can't after bishop c5 you can't play queen a6 because the sacrifice bishop takes f2 followed by queen d4 basically wins the game. So Nakamura has to defend, and then Nakamura offers an exchange of queens, which is actually pretty smart. He's hoping that Gukesh will try to play for a win, forgetting that he's playing against a 17-year-old who's part of the generation that never plays for a win. So Gukesh immediately just exchanges, which is the safest possible choice. And then we have bishop takes b5, bishop to b6, rook c1, and yeah, this is boring. Nothing is going to happen here, especially against Nakamura, who played this very well. He's got the two bishops. By the way, the two bishops more than compensate for the pawn in this position. The two bishops and the fact that this a5 pawn is weak more than compensates for the pawn. Nakamura is not going to lose at this point. It's just that he's not going to win either, and of course Nakamura needed to win, so it just wasn't going to happen. So Gukesh just plays accurately enough. I mean, we'll just blitz the rest of these moves because it's kind of insane to think that there's anything at all going on here. He does pull off a little bit of fireworks right here at the end. He manages to force Gukesh to sacrifice his rook, which is kind of cute, but it doesn't matter because this is a draw too. So this is just so silly. But Naka tried. He couldn't make anything happen. Gukesh held it, and that was that. So, I mean, this is kind of interesting because, at first glance, going into the Ding Liren match, you would think this is kind of a clash of generations, a clash of styles. But out of all the players that I've just mentioned, I didn't mention Ding Liren as, part of like the old guard that had the old style of, going for advantages, etc., because really Ding Liren plays a lot more like Gukesh than anybody else in this tournament played like Gukesh. Of course, other than the other two Indian players, Vidit and Pragnandanan. Ding Liren he plays basically the same style as Gukesh plays. He plays just, I'm just willing to play technical positions. I'm willing to play completely equal positions and just try to play them as technically accurately as possible and just make as few errors as possible. So I mean, I'm expecting the World Championship match to be two things. I'm expecting it to be a snooze fest. I'm expecting there to be like a lot of draws, a lot of technical chess, and I'm expecting it to be very close. I mean, these two players are very close in skill. It's going to be a very close, very contested match. If Ding Liren had been going up against anybody else, I would have given anybody else, like anybody else in this turn, well, not anybody else, but if he'd been going up against Nepomniachtchi, Nakamura, or Karyana, I was going to say that one of those three guys were going to be the favorite against Ding Liren. Gukesh versus Ding Liren, toss up. So Gukesh could very well be the next world champion. He's going up against the right style of player for him, and they're both going to be just kind of playing to take advantage of the other person's inaccuracies. Gukesh has youth on his side, which means he's going to be more energetic. He's going to have the ability to play these longer games. He's going to have more stamina. His focus is going to be a little bit higher, and that all kind of favors his very long technical style of chess. So I think he has every chance of becoming the youngest world champion in the world and the youngest world champion in history. And we can only hope that we're just going to see bigger and better things from him as time goes on. And if he does become the world's youngest world champion, that he manages to capitalize on that, improve, eventually become the world #1 player, and keep going from there, and just continuing to show us, a different approach to the game of chess, and continuing to sort of exemplify this generation's approach to the game of chess. As much as an old guy like me doesn't always understand it, I do understand that with each generation, the game of chess changes, and with each generation, we approach this game a little bit differently, and we just get a little bit better. And so having the youngest world champion and having the youngest player in the world win the candidates is just one more step in that direction. So good luck to Gukesh in the next world championship match against Ding Liren, and we're going to see what happens. So anyways, I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you found this video helpful. Hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you very much for watching.